sure there are going to be a lot of audience questions, and I will open it up to the floor very shortly, but I'm going to just ask one question just to kind of start. Part of what really made this film very attractive to us, and part of why we really wanted to play it, was that you do some really innovative things with the form. It's not just, there's really nothing straightforward about this documentary, and you guys have a past of working in very innovative ways with music documentaries specifically. And I wanted to ask Sam and Scott, but also Reg, it must have been painstaking, the research that you did, and all of the archival footage and photos.
Sorry, I grabbed the mic from you just on that point. I just wanted to make a point about researching clearances, because my wife did the researching clearances on the movie. Cindy, stand up. Yay! Everyone. I'll let Sam and Scott answer the egghead part of the question.
I do think it's important to recognize a couple of other people that are here, because, like Scott said before we got started, we get up here in our fancy duds and take all the credit for a lot of hard work that's done by a really amazing creative team at Banger. Derek Tokar, our head graphic artist, if you could stand up at the back. And also Alex Cooper, who edited the film with Reg. Alex, you need to stand up. But to briefly, it's a painstaking process, like we've been saying all day today. This is 2.5 years in the making, and it was really 2 phases. We created the audio radio play and put this man through what felt like several hundred interviews, I'm sure, to get the story down, and then took a year of putting all the visuals to that story. And then, of course, once you start putting the visuals to the story, you begin to rejig the story. So it was a lot of late nights, a lot of arguments resolved by vodka.
Still unresolved, some of them.
All ironic.
Oh yeah, we were snorting.
But yeah, I think, there was just some really innovative stuff. The way in which the graphics team combined photos with the footage to create scenes, I think was pretty fantastic. That was the goal. We wanted people to feel like they were in the moment, rather than pulling them out with contemporary interviews. We never wanted people to feel like they weren't in 1968 or 1971 or whatever it was. And I think we succeeded.
I'm sure you guys have a lot of audience questions. I don't want to take up too much more time. So, any questions? If you want to just raise your hand. Yes.
What's your golf handicap, Alice?
What's your golf handicap, Alice?
4.
4?
Yes.
Man.
Now, when you quit drinking, you have to find another addiction. So, I just went from addiction to addiction. Golf is a handicap too. But, I found that the more I play golf, the more pissed off Alice is on stage. Because he just hates it. And I kind of feed him that way. By the way, Dennis and Neil are here.
Yeah!
And I think, as we looked at this, we decided not to take anything out of the movie that we thought was important. So there was no editing. There were times, when you sit there and it's a little uncomfortable on both ends. And we say, Dennis, Neil, and Mike and I still do things together all the time. Playing on albums and doing charity gigs and things like that. They're still my best friends. And we really miss Glenn, of course.
Yeah, Glenn.
Glenn was our, in some strange way, was our anchor, in a lot of ways. he was the guy we all looked to, because he was our first real musician in the band. Glenn was. He could play. And he was the first to really go down. He was the one that really lived it till it took him. And we do miss him. He was one of my favorite people in the world.
Yeah, Glenn!
And Mike's not here. Mike's down in Mexico right now. But also Cindy. Cindy literally was the house mother and took care of us. And stand up, Cindy.
Cindy Smith.
Cindy made sure that we had clothes on our back. And Cindy hasn't aged a minute since 1968. It's getting a little scary now. Also, my wife Cheryl. Who's now more gorgeous than she's ever been. She's a better dancer now than she was then. And of course, the inimitable Shep Gordon. Now, the funny thing about this is Shep has his own documentary out now called Supermensch. That was that Mike Myers did on him, and we tell the same stories. But they're not the same stories. How we met, each other. None of the stories jive together. But you have to remember, we might have been drinking a little bit at the time. And, but I mean, without all these people here, nothing would have worked. And these guys drove me insane. I've never done so much talking in my life. What was it, 50 hours of interviews? And I kept saying, just say this out. I told you that already. But it was, this is the first time I've seen the finished thing tonight. I have never seen it, so I made sure I didn't see it till tonight.
Are you going to bow down and say you're not worthy?
No. No, not at all. But I'm waiting for part 2. That ended, what, 1984? 86, 32 years later, we're still here, and more has happened since then.
Yes!
So I probably should start working on part 2 now. It's not as dramatic. I mean, there was no relapse back into alcohol, so there's not that dramatic, but, any more questions? No math, okay. Yep.
I just mostly wanted to say hi, thank you for the inspiration. Just trying to talk to you, but to add a question to it, did Lester Bangs ever take back his crappy review?
Lester Bangs was a friend of ours, and we thought that was the greatest review we ever saw in our life. It was the most creative review. In fact, it was something that we would have written, And we did become good friends with Lester Bangs. And later on he did review other albums, and he kind of progressed with us. But Pretty's for You, it was so out there that now it's finally come around now to be, people listen to it now and say, that's your best album. Really?
Yeah! Yes!
Wow, you won something. But, to the real Alice Cooper fans, the albums that they liked the best were the ones that were the blackout albums. The ones when I don't remember writing, recording, touring with. There was 3 albums there that were just the blackouts.
Special Forces, Zipper Catches Skin, and Dada.
Yeah. Those are the albums I listen to now, and I kind of go, wow, was I high? But that's pretty good. That song was pretty good. Any more questions? Whoever.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. I was just wondering why we didn't hear anything from Michael in this movie.
Mike's hard to track down. Mike is he's like Izzy Stradlin. He just takes off, and he's in the desert, in the Mojave Desert somewhere, and you just can't track him down. Hard to pin down, and that's really the truth. Neil and Dennis live very close together up in Connecticut, so they're findable.
Right.
Mike is unfindable. Every once in a while we get a note from him that he's, in Pakistan or something. We never know what he's doing. So he was really the hardest guy to pin down to just to get an interview with.
Alice is usually somewhere between Spain and Mexico.
Yes, mostly Mexico.
Or between. I noticed that it was interesting. You never showed the people being interviewed. Was that why'd you make that decision? And it was we never saw anybody talk.
Really? Oh, yeah. Well, we started that from the beginning. We just said we were going to make a visually rich film that didn't have any talking heads. We said that right from the offset. There's a couple other films like The Filth and the Fury, or The Kid Stays in the Picture, or the Bill Hicks documentary we took inspiration from. But we just wanted to take it, especially since Alice has such a rich archival history, that we thought in retrospect, it was actually the most difficult thing we've ever done, because as we said, we had a radio play first, and then we had to add all this visual footage on top, which changed everything, and took another year, and we went way over budget. Shep's not happy. And that's what we took on.
A question for Alice, big fan. Got two questions actually. One, when you guys made Killers, were you listening to the Doors a lot?
On what album? Killer?
Killers.
Well, you know, we opened for the Doors for a while, and they were, when we first went to Los Angeles, they were the first people we met, were the Doors. So that might have had an influence on how we got a little bit messed up. But they were, you know, they took us on tour, and there was a couple songs that were sort of a tip of the hat to them, I think. Especially, I think, more on Easy Action. Mr. and Misdemeanor was kind of Doorsy. And when we did Desperado, I think that was actually written pretty much about Jim Morrison, you know. And people always say, you know, Jim died so young. The fact that he got to 27 was a miracle. He pushed it pretty hard, yeah.
The other thing I was curious about too is I was listening to $8 Billion Babies yesterday. How is that working with Donovan?
Yeah, Donovan was in the other studio. This was one of those nights when we're, you know, plugging along in London doing the album, and all of a sudden here comes the Hollywood Vampires. You know, it's Nielsen, Harry Nilsson comes in with T-Rex, Keith Moon, Ringo, Rick Brett, and okay, that studio, that session was going to be over right then because they were plastered. And they'd all played on the $1 Billion Babies album somewhere, but nobody can remember where they played. There's pictures, you know, I mean, Mark Bolan playing, and everybody played on the album, but we don't. And then somebody said, hey, you know, Donovan's next door. And so I went next door, and he had all these kids in there, you know, they were singing the song. And I said, enough folk music for you, come here. And he did, you know, on the song $1 Billion Babies, he was the very British voice, you know, we go dancing nightly. And I think he had more fun doing that than anything in his life. And, but people just recently went, that was Donovan? They didn't know that. Yeah, that was Donovan. Well, you know, the dichotomy of me and Alice, you know, that still goes on. You know, I mean, I play Alice every night. I realized that there were two Alices. There was the victim Alice, the early alcoholic victim Alice, who represented all, you know, the disenfranchised kids out there. And that was fun to play because there was just no rules. There was absolutely no rules, nothing to stop us. When I got sober, I realized that I wasn't this anymore. That Alice needed to be, instead of being the one beaten, he needed to be the dominatrix now. He needed to be the one that was the arrogant villain. You know, and that's the way I play him now. You know, I think that that's the way Alice should be played now, is be sort of this arrogant villain that could slip on a banana peel. You know, he might slit your throat, but he'd never swear right.
Big fans for a long time. Which do you prefer, the guillotine or the nuke?
Yeah, let me tell you something about this. There's something about this that's actually really, really interesting because we always thought there needs to be an element of circus in this. There needs to be an element of vaudeville. But at the same time, there needs to be an element of danger. When I go to the circus and I see the guy in the cage with a real tiger and he's got a chair, I mean, I'd have a machine gun myself. You know, that tiger could kill him. The guy on the tightrope up there with no net under him, you know, he could fall. That's a 40-pound blade. And it only misses me by that much every night. The closer it gets to me, the better it looks. So we kept lowering it, lowering it, lowering it. Every single, to this day, when that blade's in there, if I don't move at the right time, it's going to hit me. You know, so the element of that, this could be Alice's last concert, is always in the show. The hanging, there's something really unnerving about the floor opening up and you dropping. And the noose stopping right here instead of here. You know, if the wire breaks, I was at that concert. I was there when Alice Cooper. But we keep it like that because of the fact that, in all honesty, that makes the show more. It gives it that extra edge.
So for you, it's a 50-50 split on profit?
I'm sorry, what?
It's a 50-50 split?
Well, it's pretty, I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen, but the wire did break in London one time. And it caught me here. I snapped my head back, and I had a burn under here. If I wouldn't have done that, it would have caught me, and it would have done some damage, a lot of damage. But I went through the floor, knocked me out and everything like that. But then we realized that you can't do 100 shows without changing the wire. Right. It loses a little bit of its strength. Yeah.
So we have time for one more question.
I've been a big fan of the Alice Cooper band, and also, Alice as an inspiration actually for everything that you went through, and to come back as strong and as mean and nasty as ever, and I love it. And I want, I always liked your trilogy album of the Dragon Town, and I always wondered why, if after several times of seeing you, in shows, that you never brought Trigger Man. I've never seen Trigger Man. When am I going to see it?
Yeah, Trigger Man is actually a really good stage song, too. Mark that down, Shep. Trigger Man, yeah, was one of those rock songs that deserves to be on stage. Wicked Young Man, I think, was the one that took its place. But Trigger Man is one of those songs. When you do songs in the studio, you're going, okay, that's great, great. And then you go, stage song. That's a stage song. We always did that in the original band. We always knew what songs were going to be stage songs and which ones weren't. You could just feel them. You knew when the band was in playing, you could see the band, how they were going to be on stage with that, and you say, we keep that one, we keep that one, we keep that one. Audience isn't going to get that at all. But you're right, Trigger Man is one of those songs. And every tour that we do, we always throw in one or two songs that the audience wouldn't expect that would make a person like you really happy. Something off of a really obscure album, the 15th cut that nobody ever hears on the radio. And then let's do that one. And then we'll see who the real fans are.
BB on Mars.
BB on Mars. Wow. 10 seconds to warning. Keep your eye on this guy.
So I just want to say one last thing. I think it seems there's sort of a common theme in heavy metal. Ronnie James Dio talks a lot about the dark and the light, and I have a feeling that a lot of the most brutal, terrifying performers are the nicest people on earth. So, I think that you touched upon this a lot in the film, but in your experience working with some of these people that some of the public might deem as psychotic killers, do you feel like those people tend to have a sort of softer side to them? Or?
No, they're all psychic killers.
On that note.
No, it really is true that these guys have worked with Iron Maiden, they've worked with, Rush, and people like that, and I'm sure they're going to go on and work with other guys, in the business with interesting careers. Marilyn would be kind of interesting to do. But at the same time, you find that guys that have been through the wars, 3 or 4 wars, I mean, this is fifth time around for us. You've been there, you've done it. You kind of know where the traps are. You know where the whole. And I see young bands and I go, oh, what? Don't step over there. What? You're gonna miss it. Oh yeah, see ya. Yeah. And if the only way you can avoid those traps is to live it. You have to get through it. I found my way through. Of course, I was the prodigal son. I grew up in the church, went away to the church, came back to the church, and that was my way of getting back. But now I love playing Alice. I mean, I can't wait to play Alice on the next tour. It's my favorite thing. But at the same time, I love being at home with my kids also. And my wife travels with me now. In fact, Cheryl is back in the show. Yay. Better than ever. And it's so much fun to travel, with your wife, knowing that she's actually more talented than you are. She plays the nurse now, and she's just horrific. She gets up there, and I look at her and I go, you can't make yourself ugly because you're still the best looking thing out here. You know? So anyway, we just had our 38th anniversary.
Yeah!
And same with Chef too, Chef. I mean, you just keep getting better looking. It's amazing.
And just the last word, we've done a lot of heavy metal docs, and we perpetuate the myth that Ronnie James Dio came up with the metal horns. But if you'll see from this film, it was Neil Smith.
Yay!
No knocking, it was Glenn.
Was it Glenn doing? No, but Glenn thought that he was doing hook 'em horns. He was, he was at Texas University or the Aggies. And the first time I saw this, I went, wow, a lot of Texas people here. Hook 'em horns.
All right, thank you all so much for coming out, and thank you so much to all the filmmakers and